Welcome to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I'm your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team. My hope is to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Many districts that I've talked to over the last several years face the challenge of breaking down silos and creating consistent practices when it comes to implementing MTSS. And this is no small feat, because if you want to make a difference for your student, you have to do more than just have surface level collaboration. It takes deep district alignment. And so today, joining us from Person County School District in North Carolina, we have Kelly Kiser, the Executive Director of Accountability and Curriculum Support, and Lyndsay Hubbard, the District Math Specialist and Instructional Support. They're here to share about their unified approach, which transformed their MTSS culture and led to some pretty impressive mid-year data. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I'm so excited to hear more about your district and kind of the work that you've been doing. So first of all, I would love for each of you to share about yourself and your role and share a little bit about your district.
All right. So my name is Kelly Kiser, and I am the Executive Director of Accountability and Curriculum Support. So the curriculum support side of that is I do work within the MTSS framework with implementation processes within that, more the logistical type things, and then I've been supporting Lyndsay, who is our math specialist, and Tanya Peterson, who is our reading specialist, and just in the things that we do within our MTSS framework, and then with data. So I've been in Person County schools my entire career. So I'm a native of Person County, and so I went to school in Person County. So I love this district. I love the people that are in it, and it's just such a privilege to be able to give back and be a part of what raised me. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'm Lyndsay Hubbard, and I do, as she said earlier, support K-8 math. That's had many different titles over the years: specialist, support coach, whatever you want to call us, support K-8 math. And so in collaboration with Kelly, we're able to take the structures that she's put in place with MTSS, and we're more boots on the ground to where we're able to meet with every K-8 teacher in the district every 2 weeks to discuss math, of course, but also get into the nitty gritty of MTSS with all the tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3. My background, also native of Person County, born and raised here, went through the school system, have been in the school system for 19 years now, and mainly have supported elementary throughout the years, but have this year had the opportunity to support secondary as well.
Well, I'm so glad you guys are here, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about this work that you're doing. Sounds like there's if you have people dedicated to the roles, it means that you're doing some of this work. So when you look back on sort of the MTSS work that you've done in Person County back in the fall, maybe even just like last fall or even last spring, what was the main hurdle that your team had yet to set out to overcome?
So we as a district, we've had our framework in place for a while. We've had a lot of we've been working as a district to put some things together, and things that we know that we want to happen, things that we have shared out, and we've kind of sprinkled over the years. And what we really knew that we needed to kind of bring some strength and emphasis to is just documentation of the student data, documentation of the intervention that's being provided, the progress monitoring that's being done, to really gather that into a place to where it can be tracked and monitored and talked about collaboratively.
Yeah. Well, and I think always making sure that having everything documented and in place makes a big difference. So I know that through some of our communication, you have talked about establishing a deep alignment across all the roles and all the people, whether that be curriculum specialists or even just in your cross-functional teams. So tell us a little bit about how you brought a lot of those different voices to the table, because we know that MTSS doesn't happen. Is it just one person's job? There's lots of people involved in it. What does that look like for collaboration to be on the ground? What does that look like for you guys in Person County?
So I think that At the district level, we're able to collaborate as a team with Kelly. And then I have a counterpart for reading who is not with us today, as well as our chief academic officer in elementary support as well, to make those structural decisions, like with our standard treatment protocols. And then from there, we're able to take that structure out. And my counterpart and I, like I said, we go out into every school every 2 weeks. And so the same conversation that we're having at the district level, we're there able to have with every single teacher and every single PLC in our K-8 schools every 2 weeks to make sure that that conversation, the communication piece, is consistent, that everyone's hearing the same thing, we're following the same structures, processes, protocols to ensure, like you said, that collaboration goes from that surface level to a much deeper level and doesn't just stay in necessarily leadership, not a top-down necessarily viewpoint, but to where everyone is brought to the table for those conversations.
Yeah, I always think that it's making sure that everyone's hearing the same thing, right? Because I think oftentimes you can have these conversations in a leadership meeting and, express your desire for all this stuff to happen, but if that doesn't get translated to your people in the classroom with the students, if they don't hear the same message, it's like that game of telephone, right? Like making sure instead of telephone, you want to like send a megaphone, right?
And
And
I
making sure that
think
everyone hears
that
it.
that's what we've seen in the years past. Like, we have felt so we've had the opportunity to work together for the past 5 years, and at times we have felt so confident in the decisions we were making at the district level, but then we realized that when we only communicated it to our principals, then that's 10, 11 different principals in our district, and then that communication would look differently to the teachers. I mean, it's a game of telephone, right? And so what we thought we had put in place became a very different communication as it continued to work its way down the line, which presented problems for sure.
Yeah. And this year was focused on just restructuring just that communication, and everybody, even in the past, the way things were communicated. So, all the things were there, like I said earlier, just kind of sprinkled throughout. But, it's bits and pieces here and there. And so, and everybody receives messages differently. So this year was really focused on restructuring that, just the way that works, and having our math and our reading specialists in all of the PLCs every other week was just a game changer. I mean, it really made all the difference. Our teachers had the support there, the communication was the same, and it just really brought everything into a very nice alignment.
Yeah. And I always think that there's that piece of that even if you communicate things to a principal, right? The principal has a way of dissipating that message, or they have different priorities, or they have different urgent things that maybe that school is addressing versus some of these other pieces. But I also imagine that being in those PLC meetings also allows you to provide support for those teams in a different way that maybe you haven't done in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had the standard treatment protocol for at least the past few years where a lot of that support is listed. But then once again, what we realized was that many of the teachers unfortunately didn't even know that existed, or they didn't know how to read all the information because realistically, it is a lot of information. And so by us being able to go into the PLCs, we could, number one, constantly refer back to that standard treatment protocol. But just as important, like you said, as referring back to it, we could explain it and we could talk through the pieces of information that were included and really help those teachers make those instructional decisions that need to be made with students who, we went into going into the PLCs, especially when we focused on our tier 2, tier 3, or students that were identified as tier 2 and tier 3, we would always have an established protocol. And so teachers knew non-negotiable that we were going to be there every week, once for reading, once for math, non-negotiable that we were going to discuss the students and their progress. Therefore, that led them to implement the interventions and the progress monitoring and enter the progress monitoring because that's what we were discussing. And then from there, the meat of the conversation became, was the student making progress? And if the student is making progress, what does the standard treatment protocol say about next steps versus if they're not making progress, what does the standard treatment protocol talk about? And then because we were content specialists for math and reading, we could get into the nitty gritty of what we knew about that student in terms of that content area and exactly what resources would be most appropriate for that student. That was also listed on the standard treatment protocol, but those resources may have been new for teachers as well. So it really provided a multi-layer of support of just the not just telling, right, but the actual teaching of the process that we wanted them to follow with these students.
Well, teaching
Yes.
and coaching them through the process, right? I
Yes.
feel like that's so much more beneficial for all the teachers and everyone involved versus just handing them the document and saying, "Do this."
Yeah.
It helps them feel not like another thing, right? I think we've all experienced that in education where someone drops a binder in our lap and say that you need to follow this and doesn't provide any support or coaching along the way. And then you feel very either angry and resentful or frustrated and you just don't even do it, you know?
And like you said, just not understanding the why. Like you said, it's just another checklist. Like, here's another program. Here's Branch of Minds. Never heard of it. They want me to do all this extra work. And so I think, like you said, boots in the ground, getting down to the nitty gritty of how this is affecting the progress of our students, help them establish that why and see it more as than just another to do that we're asking them to do.
Yes. And having them there, and I love how Lyndsay keeps saying boots on the ground because it is like they were there. They were always there. When they said they were going to be there, they were there. And in doing that, they're helping build capacity, which is, where we in the direction that we definitely want to go, and just building confidence in our teams and being able to make those decisions with confidence and having them there to kind of guide them through that and facilitate those conversations has really helped being able to do that.
Hey, I'm very curious, sort of this adjustment from maybe you not being as present in the PLCs to this place where you were. How do you feel like that's impacted sort of the culture and the conversation amongst your staff around MTSS?
Yeah, just the willingness, right?
Mhm.
Because and still going back to they understand the purpose now and they understand when you experience a success, right? You start to we can tell people things all day long. Like, if you do this, this is going to happen. But until they actually experience that success, that willingness, that intrinsic motivation, it's not going to be there. And so by us being there to hold them accountable or to coach them or guide them, through the process and doing it with them, I think that's the biggest difference too. Like, going from the telling to actually being with them, and then they experience that success, that's going to increase their willingness to continue, because it's not just us saying, here, do this, but it's them actually seeing the evidence of, oh, when I did this, this is the success that I see. So through that process, we were able to increase their willingness to be able to do that, and just that buy-in in general. So it's not as much now as just an extra to-do list, but an actual part of their instruction daily.
Yes. And having that support there. I mean, having someone that they know that there's going to be there, that they can ask questions to, and knowing that they're supported in what they're doing is, has been,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's so helpful.
We're with them. We're not, like, it's an interesting, and I feel like it's probably like this in most every district, right? Until you walk in somebody's shoes, you don't know what they do daily. And so at times there can very much be this perception that, like, oh, you're not in the classroom, you're not in the trenches, you're just sitting in your office telling us what to do. And so I think by us, because we have to have those people that sit in the office, right, to make all these decisions, but I think us kind of being the bridge this year, it was no longer we're just telling you what to do, but we're actually here doing it with you. Like, we're going to come to the PLC every single time prepared to discuss these students. And so we're doing that with you, not just telling you to do that.
Yeah. I mean, they knew if they had questions, they were going to be back. It wasn't just a one and done. It wasn't just a once every now and then. There was a true, consistent, they were with one of them every single week, whether it was reading or math focused.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's so important to just kind of like put a star by for our listeners, is thinking about what are the ways that we're with our staff or with the team rather than the leader up front doing the things in the office. I feel like, I mean, I was an instructional coach for several years, so I totally understand that sentiment of like, oh, what do you actually do all day? That idea of what does it look like to be a coach and to be there with them in the work and in the nitty gritty, as Lyndsay said. So I think that's important to note. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the success that you're seeing. So, one of the stats that was shared with me was just that the idea that over 70% of your tier 2 and tier 3 reading students and over 80% of math students, you have an active intervention and progress monitoring plan. So that means students that need the things that they need are getting them. Is that I mean, that's amazing, right? Like, it's sort of evidence of the work that you're doing that students are getting the support they needed. When you think about those numbers, what does that say about the dedication of the teachers and your team?
I think, and I want to be very clear, we have not arrived yet. So we are making progress, and there's definitely still next steps that we need to take to continue to deepen our teachers' understanding of the interventions, the most appropriate interventions, and how to read the data. But I think that says with our teachers, just once again, their willingness to take a chance, so to say. I don't know if take a chance is the right word, but their willingness to work alongside with us and actually implement the interventions and look. And, it's everything from looking at schedules from day one, like where does this realistically fit in? And that might look a little bit different in every single classroom because we know the data looks different in every single classroom. The number of students that we need to intervene with is going to look different in classrooms versus grade levels versus schools. And so I think also to that flexibility piece and knowing that we're flexible is like we have the standard treatment protocol, but also that being realistic with teachers and knowing what the constraints could be, like how do we make it fit? And I think through having those conversations as well, then they're willing to say, okay, I can do my part. Y'all are doing yours part. I can do my part with that. And that, I know I've said willingness multiple times, but that just has increased their willingness. And like you said, we really, truly, I think we can say, speaking of our teachers and just thinking about this year as a whole, they show up every day doing what they think is absolutely right for their students, if that makes sense. And so much of that is absolutely the best thing for students. And also that they're willing to say, okay, yes, this is working, but also acknowledge through the data. And that's why, try to stick to the data as much as we can, that if this is not working, their willingness and ability to pivot, right? Pivot's a word we use all the time.
What are we going to do?
And so I think that speaks highly to the dedication of our teachers as well, that they are willing to have those conversations. They show up to the PLCs. And like as the year progressed, once we got the structures and the protocols in place, like they showed up, they were ready to talk about it, and they were ready to pivot if they needed to pivot. So I think that speaks a lot to their dedication as well.
Yes. At the beginning of this question, Lyndsay said that we still have some work to do, and that's always the case. And I just want to toss in there that while that, yes, we do have some work to do, and we have, everything that we do is a learning process. It's, how has this worked? What do we do next? This year that we just wrapped up, having this restructure has been such a game changer, and so much credit goes to so many people across our district, from our district leadership on board 100%, always knowing, they know the schedule, they know where everybody is, what's happening when the PLCs are happening every single week. Our administrators in the building, same thing. They're in the PLCs with the teachers for the most part. And then, Lyndsay and Tanya, our math and reading specialists, in there with our teachers. Everybody's on board. Everybody has a part. And just everybody knowing what that expectation is, having that consistency, same language is being spoken, same standard treatment protocol. And so that just really no matter when a conversation happens, it's going to always lead to the same things because everybody understands it in the same way. And everybody that's been a part of really kind of bringing that to the table this year has been great. And everybody has truly had such a big part of that.
And you're seeing the results of that. You're already seeing the impact, right? Oftentimes we talk about with the work of MTSS that it takes a while to see how the impact on students, right? Some of it is some of those changes of the structure and the staff, but like to start to see the impact on students is always like a lag measure, right? But it's really evident now that you see the increased amount of students that are getting the support that they need, that you are seeing the success of the work that you're doing, even though you have more work to do.
Always. That never ends. Yes. Always can get better. Always room to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And because you'll get a new crop of students.
New crop of students, new crop of teachers.
Exactly.
Teacher turnover is a real thing, whether it's teachers retiring, moving districts, or just deciding different occupations. So, yes, there's always work to be done. But like Kelly said, we try to have a really big mindset in our district of every single one of us. I mean, the two of us sitting here, our superintendent, we all can get better. Like, we're constantly learning and reflecting and making changes as needed to increase.
So, talk a little bit about, you've seen the increase in the number of students meeting need. What did that look like before? I'm curious, like, what did it look like before you've made all these changes? what did it look like for students to get support before?
Well, so a lot of the way we identified students, or as far as knowing like who our tier 2 students were, who our tier 3 students were, none of that has really changed a whole lot. We've had those pieces of our framework in place for a few years. And so as far as the data, I think our numbers of the students who needed support, that varies with the group. It varies with the grade level. And so going into this year, I don't think that it was, it was pretty much aligned with where we are every year. What was different this year is the way that the approach to support those students was a little bit different. Intervention was happening, progress monitoring was happening, but being able to see it and document it and really have those valuable conversations with our content specialists and someone to really kind of guide and get, have everybody on the same page as far as how we're looking at that is where we really saw the progress. So, we were able to see, Lyndsay has said, when you can see the outcome and you can see the difference that it made in the students' progress and how, then that is where it's like that visual, you see it and you know it, and it really drives the conversations of what to do next. And I think that's really where we've seen the biggest difference. And, and our kids have made huge strides this year, 100%, when they are, when we can see it and we can have those conversations, our teachers, everybody, they, it's a motivation to keep doing what we're doing and make those decisions to make the changes that we need to make.
Yeah. I do think that's it's important to note that seeing is believing, right? Like seeing the work or seeing the progress and seeing the data just helps you buy in a little bit more to the work. Because I'm sure there's school districts across the country that great reading intervention is happening. You are like so many districts are supporting students, but so oftentimes if we don't see the evidence of that, we don't really know where is it. It's happening in silos or in pockets, or this school has this great reading intervention program and this school doesn't. And so I just feel like that unified approach makes everybody like rowing in the same direction, right?
Something you just said caught my attention because that's something the reading specialist and myself have talked about this year. The value that we have been in every single school, because I'm the first to admit I don't know it all. And we have some phenomenal teachers who have such deep content knowledge that we can then sit at one school, let's say on a Wednesday, and this grade level or this teacher, 5th grade teacher, has an idea about whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, but about like the intervention or the instruction happening in the core. And I'm like, this school that I'm going to on Friday would so benefit from hearing that idea. And so often our teachers, even though we try to give them opportunities to collaborate across the district, it happens a couple of times a year, realistically, right? And so then we also kind of get to breathe that bridge between schools like, well, so-and-so at this school is trying this intervention. How about we try it for this student? Because it sounds like they have a very similar need. And so through being able to have that voice across all of the schools, I think has really been a strength as well. So like you said, it's not, we're taking those silos, right, where we're seeing those positive student outcomes and expanding that through that conversation.
So can you think of a can you think of a student or even a group of students? You don't have to share particulars or anything, but can you think of a student or a group of students that you feel like that this work has made a big difference for this year?
We can think of students pop to mind, of course, and especially it's going to be on the math side, that like we definitely have stories as assessed with students who, when they came in with their initial screener, they were identified as tier 3. The teacher was fantastic at consistent intervention, progress monitoring, almost weekly or biweekly, entering the data, adjusting as needed. And now that student on the final screener, and not even on the final screener, but like we could even get to the state test, ended up being proficient, was tier 1 on the final screener. So we definitely have stories like that across the district for math and for reading, some individual students, some actually, groups of students. But I think, and we've talked about it here, just structure is just so important. And that's what I said, like our teachers know what, I really truly believe most of our teachers know what to do. Somebody once told me, inspect what you expect. And so by bringing it to light, having the consistent conversations, they then did what they knew was the right thing to do and was able to have that success with those students and groups of students.
I love hearing this because I just feel like it's evidence of when you put in the work that you can see the results, right? Because I feel like when you look at MTSS implementation, it often seems very daunting. I think any kind of big change, right? You're looking at a district, you're like, oh, that's a lot of work. Is it worth it? And it is, because it does impact students. I would love for you to think about a little bit about a district leader, maybe like yourself, somewhere around the country that maybe that's listening to this and is overwhelmed by this kind of change. What, based on your journey so far at Person County, what would be the single best advice you would offer them as they're getting started or thinking about making a big change like this?
Well, and I'll say that just with what we've experienced, even just because the things that we used this year, our resources, our standard treatment protocol, our framework, none of that was new this year. And so what made the difference this year was just the restructure of how teachers and administrators are being supported. So for us, it was really just trying to figure out how we could make that work. Like, how can we restructure the way that support is being provided so that we can build that capacity, so that we can build the confidence to, when we're thinking about, and using Branch of Minds, even if you just think about that alone, going in and, doing the plans, entering the progress monitoring, reviewing group plans and things like that, just doing that and feeling like I understand, even just whether it's within the platform or whether it's within the standard treatment protocol. Lyndsay said earlier that our teachers they know, they know their kids, they know their data, and they have such strong instructional content delivery and planning. This brought a kind of a cohesive togetherness, I guess, of just all the things. But that restructuring of how the support was being provided was really the biggest thing this year. And that PLC schedule, in the summer, it was put together and it was shared out with the principals, and everybody knew where everybody was every day. And principals knew that it was a priority. They knew that our, math and instructional reading and specialists were going to be there. They were going to be there to support, to answer questions, to help provide that content. And so it was just everybody was on the same page, and it really helped. I mean, like I said earlier, it just, the alignment that it brought to everything. We really just, as the year went on, that's been huge. Yeah. It really has.
We talked about a couple things yesterday in a meeting we had, and, we kept coming back to structure. And that's exactly what Kelly just said. Like, with the calendar that was set up, it was set up in like June. So I could tell you last June of 25, I'm like, what year are we in? Last June of 25, where I was going to be on September 19th and where I was going to be on April 19th. Mm-hmm. So from the get-go, that structure was set. And then even once we started going into PLCs, the protocol, we taught the reading specialist and I, we used the same protocol every single time. So through that, we were able to have that consistency, both reading and math, but also it created confidence in teachers because then they knew exactly what to expect. And through that protocol, then we were able to walk with them through the logistical branch of minds, right? All the clicks that you might have to make. We were able to walk with them through the content decisions on what was going to be the best interventions and progress monitoring. But yes, those structures and those resources and people, money's a real thing, but if you can find people, to help lead that, it makes a world of difference.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing about Person County and just the work you're doing. It sounds like you have an amazing team and amazing teachers that are doing the hard work to support students. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. And so we just appreciate you being here and sharing this story. And so I'm excited to share this with our audience. So hope you guys have a good summer.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.